Just
Thank you, Mr. Mapisa. We wish to greet the Honorable MEC for Health in KwaZulu-Natal, Honorable Zulu, all our government officials who are with us, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us as always. We welcome all of you to this media briefing as we continue to chart the progression of COVID-19, which has changed our lives in ways we could never have imagined. As the province of KwaZulu-Natal, we wish to start by welcoming the announcement by the President, His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, that the country will, with the effect from midnight today, descale to alert level 1. We wish on behalf of the people of KwaZulu-Natal province to thank the leadership of His Excellency the President and the National Coronavirus Command Council for their astute leadership in steering the country as we weather one of the most devastating storms of our time. The commencement of Alert Level 1 signifies that the risk and the rate of infection that we have been exposed to has been brought to lower level. We can confirm that as KwaZulu-Natal, we are heading for a smooth passage to Alert Level 1. We really have come a long way as the nation and as the province in our battle against COVID-19. We have moved from the confusion, fear, panic, and anxiety that marked the early stages of the outbreak. We have done very well to heed the call by government that this disease needed to be demystified and understood so that we could be better placed to contain its spread and protect our people from acquiring it or passing it on to others. With the threat of COVID-19 staring us in the face, government had an existential dilemma that was to do or to choose the economy over the lives of the people. In the end, we chose to save lives. When the history of COVID-19 and its devastating impact is recorded, the swift actions of our government and the compromises and sacrifices made by a number of citizens and sectors will occupy those glorious chapters. As we would remember, government had made concessions with regard to the functioning of the public service during the lockdown. This relates to rotation of staff, concession to work from home due to a number of reasons, including comorbidities and the dire need to comply with COVID-19 protocols. There is now a need for all departments and all municipalities in the province to review some of the arrangements made at the peak of the virus and ensure that the public service report back to work in full force so that it can drive the rebuilding process. The Department of Public Service and Administration, as the line function department, will guide us in this regard. However, we are directing that all of us start prepare ourselves for the return to work so that we will cover the lost ground. We have to build as if we are emerging from the ruins of a major war, and we need all our troops to the battle. In terms of rebuilding the economy, COVID-19 has come at a huge cost and devastated our economy. We have had to contend with closure of businesses, loss of jobs and livelihood. Our entry into level after midnight tonight means that most sectors of the economy will be open. We have to take this opportunity to restart our lives and rebuild our economy. One of the most effective ways in which we can do this is to support the South African economy, especially our small and medium-sized enterprises, by buying goods and services that are locally made. We also call on South Africans, particularly our young people, to not only look at getting employed, but to get into the spirit of entrepreneurship. They need to come up with innovative ways to seek and exploit economic opportunities so that they can be the masters of their own destiny. As we look to rebuild the economy, we cannot overemphasize the need to build a modern knowledge economy populated by a workforce that is entrepreneurial in spirit and outlook, and which in numerical and scientific literacy and competent with technology and has a problem skills. This is crucial in fostering economic development and competitiveness in this province, which is anchored on the following: developing and equipping highly skilled human capacity with critical skills matching industry and industry needs in priority economic sectors, creating new business opportunities and adding value to small, medium enterprises and companies in technology and knowledge-based sectors, enhancing the synergy between industry, government, academia, and research, fostering entrepreneurship and incubating new innovative enterprises, and lastly, providing attractive collaborative space that bring together different emerging knowledge centers, organizations, and communities. With regard to rolling out our strategic infrastructure program, we will in the coming weeks launch the KwaZulu-Natal Economic Restructuring and Recovery Plan, where we will detail interventions to stimulate each sector of our economy. Radical economic transformation will be our anchor program as we build back a post-COVID-19 people's economy with new features and patterns representing the demographics of our country. The reopening of the economy is a boom to the tourism sector, which is one of the biggest contributors to job creation in our province. We are excited to see that there are already good or nice life problems that are emerging as we hear that in the hospitality industry, things are changing for the better. There are areas where people are beginning to struggle to get accommodation due to places getting fully booked. If we may reflect on the occupancy rate, in eThekwini this week they are reporting 65% occupancy rate. In Ilembe they are reporting 60%. In Uku they are reporting 30%. In Umgungundlovu, which include Midlands, PMB, and Midland Miende, it ranges between 75 to 95%, Zululand 30%, Amajuba 50%, Ezemvelo, KZN wildlife establishments are at 30% occupancy rate. With regard to new investment, we welcome the news about new investment in the tourism sector. We have learned about South Africa's first Hilton Garden Inn establishment, which is scheduled to open at Umhlanga Ark in November of this year. The 203 room is owned by the multi-group and the property development company called DEVM company. We also learn that on the 1st of September, the first group owned by a luxury the first group opened a luxury wedding venue with a 7-suite villa on Drakensberg. The Durban Edward Hotel on Durban's Golden Miles, the beachfront, will reopen in November 2020 under the full ownership of Tsogo Sun Hotel, which was a previous shareholder. These investments are encouraging and are a huge sign of confidence in our hospitality sector. Fairmont Zimbali Business Rescue, we have also noted that the IFA Fairmont Zimbali Hotel and Resort has gone into business rescue following difficulties experienced as a result of the country entering into lockdown in March, which brought the tourism industry into its knees. Government is in discussion with the owners in pursuit of a solution that will ensure that this establishment is sustainable and continue to provide iconic tourism product on the north coast of our destination, and we will ensure that we work hard with them to protect jobs. We are adamant that by reopening its doors, our tourism recovery plan should not only mean a mere reopen to old pre-COVID-19 ways of doing business. This is a time for all of us to double our effort and inject a renewed sense of viv and vigor into our work in order to realize and fully explore the economy's vast and diverse tourism potential. But it is a time also to continue with transformation of the economy. Coming into the latest statistics and trends on COVID-19, the number of cases reported in the province has declined drastically. We must emphasize that we are still vigilant and on full alert. While regulations are being relaxed, we are fully cognizant that the virus has not yet relaxed. It is still deadly and vicious. Since the beginning of September, the median number of cases reported dropped to 233 cases daily, which then meant numbers were ranging between 79 to 371. The total number of infections in the province currently stand at 117,569, of which 7,034 are still active. Sadly, the province has had 2,531 deaths. It is, however, encouraging that 108,000 or 94% of the infected have recovered. Over the past 2 weeks, since we last had this media briefing, the province has registered 3,209 new infections and 268 deaths. You will notice that at some point, we were registering between 3,500 and 3,900 new infections on a daily basis. Of the new reported deaths, King Cetshwayo had the highest proportion of deaths at 54%, followed by Amajuba at 31%. The province has had a total of 2,531 deaths since the beginning of the pandemic. The median age for the deaths was 51 years. Over half of deceased were female, which is about 52%. In terms of numbers, we can report that eThekwini has reported 69 new cases, and the total number of cases in eThekwini now stands at 55,407. Ilembe, 18 new cases, and the total number of cases in Ilembe is 6,409. Umkungundlovu recorded 28 new cases, and the total number of cases is 16,119. Utugela, 2 new cases. Total number of all cases is 4,988. King Chwayo, 21 new cases. 10,015 is the total number of cases. Ugu, 20 new cases. 4,860 is the total number of cases. Amachuba, 14 cases, new cases, and the total number of cases that have been registered in Amachuba stands at 6,721. Umkanyagude, 15 cases, and the total number of all cases in Umkanyagude is 2,535. Hirikwala, 3 cases. The total number of all cases or of cases registered is 2,351. Zululand, 14 new cases, and total number of cases that have been recorded since the beginning of the pandemic is 4,791. Umzinyat, 4 cases, new cases, and the total number of cases 2,540. Unallocated, it's 1, and the total number of cases that are unallocated since the beginning, it's 833. Now, we have reported that the new cases are 209, and the total number of cases in the province stand at 117,569. In terms of healthcare workers, a total number of 7,360 healthcare workers were infected with COVID-19 since the beginning of the pandemic. About 70% of the infected have recovered. Of the total infected, 68 have unfortunately succumbed to the disease. May their soul rest in peace and their families be comforted. In terms of hospitalization, on the 19th of September, the province had 640 patients admitted in both private and public hospitals. Of those admitted, 115 patients required intensive care services. Private hospitals had more patients in ICU, and they were having 106. Then the public hospitals had 9. Among those who required intensive care, 20% were ventilated and 20% were ventilated. About 11% of the patients were admitted in high care units in both private and public facilities. In terms of investigation, we wish to update you that the departments that are undertaking actions on various matters and investigations, they have confirmed that the work is still ongoing. Matters are at various stages of either disciplinary actions or exercising consequence management. Where cases needed to be open, criminal cases, that work has been done, and criminal processes is undertaking its own procedures. Should there be new development, you will be appraised. We are going to be celebrating the National Heritage Day this week, and the Heritage Month is in September, and the Heritage Day on the 24th of September in particular is commemorated annually to celebrate our national diverse culture and heritage. It is an extremely important part of social cohesion and waving and strengthening the fabric that make us who we are as the nation of South Africa. For the very first time in our own history, this year's Heritage Day will be celebrated virtually due to COVID-19 pandemic. This year's theme for Heritage Month is, and I quote, celebrating South Africa's living human treasures, close quote, which is quite relevant when you consider the many giants and other important personalities that we have lost during this year. We therefore call upon all South Africans to respect, treasure, and use all our living legends to harvest our history so that we can have a better appreciation of this country's long and painful past in order to chart a positive and prosperous future. For us to realize our massive potential as the country, especially as we try to recover from the damage caused by COVID-19, the question of social cohesion and nation building remain quite important. With regard to the second wave, we wish to remind our fellow compatriots that alert level 1 is still part of the lockdown. Regulations will be enforced. The curfew must be observed, and those selling alcohol must do so in line with the regulations. We are noting the new tricks that some are using to sell during prohibited hours and days. The law enforcement agencies are watching and they will take actions. Remember, when you drink, they also speak, and therefore we are going to get you if you undermine the regulations. As we conclude, we wish to really call on all our citizens not to be complacent by dropping their COVID-19 guard. The possible second wave of COVID-19 is not just an empty talk, but constitutes a real threat. While the noticeable decline in the rate of new COVID-19 infections and deaths is welcome and need to be appreciated, there is no shortage of examples where countries have experienced a second wave, and therefore all of us should work and conduct ourselves as expected. You will see countries like India, the US, Spain, Vietnam, New Zealand, Brazil, and South Korea, to mention a few, have suffered the second wave. Therefore, when we are saying stopping COVID-19 is in our hand, we really need to internalize that message. We therefore call on all people of KwaZulu-Natal to continue wearing a mask, face mask, wash our hands regularly with soap and water or hand sanitizer, maintaining social distancing of at least 1.5 meters between ourselves and other people. We are extremely grateful to all citizens who have abided by these regulations and precautions. They are the reason we do not talk of a complete disaster today. We implore all others to do the same. We thank you.
Okay, you can start.
Thank you for the opportunity. Ngibingelele nakubahlonishwa. Sibonge nokuthi size safika ku-lockdown siphelele. Kusukela ku-5 sathi 1 touchdown. Anyway, bengifisa ukwazi ukuthi njengoba uPremier uthi kuzovuleka yonke into manje base ku level 1. Kuyaba nenkinga uthola ukuthi isikhathi esiningi amahhovisi kagovernment amaningi adla ngokungavuli. Ngabe mhlawumbe sizobona yini nabonke abantu basebenza government bebuyela ngoba ngempela during the time ye lockdown kube nenkinga nanokuthi nabantu abafuna ama services bangakwazi ukuwathola. Ilo mbuzo wami ngiyabonga.
Thank you. Karinda from Newsroom Africa. The first question for you, Premier. During the President's speech last week, he said that 30 hotspots had been identified across the country where there were high numbers of GBV incidents reported. Are some of the hotspots identified in KZN? Can you tell us about these hotspots and what work is the provincial government then doing in this regard there? A second question for the Health MEC. We've seen the reports this week regarding issues at the Wentworth Hospital and the staff that were staying at the hospital premises. If you can give us an update into the resolution for what's happened there. And I'd also like to know, now that we're moving into level 1, what work will the Cuban doctors continue doing, as well as will staff who have been told to leave the Wentworth Hospital premises, will they continue working at the hospital? If you can give us that update, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Over to Premier.
No, thanks. The offices will be opened, and we will follow the regulations that are going to be presented by the Department of Public Service and Administration. We must take this opportunity to emphasize that all workers will need to go back to their offices, and they will be guided in doing that. Service delivery and services must be rendered and given to our people in all areas. And we know that the lockdown caused serious challenges, and we wish to take an opportunity to apologize to our people on that. But from now onward, we are going to open all offices, all municipalities, and all departments. Let me say, be clear, all workers will have to come back. Thank you. On the issue of GPV, and I'm sure MEC will also add on that, we are working on that. We cannot now confirm how many spots do we have in the province, but we know that number of areas in KwaZulu-Natal are affected by the scourge of gender-based violence. What are we doing? As government, we have a comprehensive program that seeks to address the gender-based violence. The program starts by ensuring that we mobilize the community. Mobilize the community to expose people who are criminals and doing these things, but mobilize males, mobilize men and young boys, educate them, so that they will respect women and children. We're working on that. But 2, where incidents have taken place, we work hard to ensure that perpetrators are arrested. And where they've been arrested, you have seen sentences given to the imposed on them. They've been given harsh sentences, and we want to applaud judiciary for that. But we continue to provide support, psychological support, to those who are victims, and ensure that victims are assisted to get back to their life, and assisted also in terms of survival, maybe to get opportunities in terms of the economy. And we want to thank the private sector that have partnered with us at some point in that work. So it is a holistic program that starts from prevention and mobilization of the community, supporting the victims, but also ensure that at the end, women are empowered. Let me take this opportunity to then allow MEC to come on and address the next question.
Thank you very much. Premier, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, Sihle, we are very grateful that today most of us are still here and we have not lost many of us, because 2020 has been a very difficult year for the majority of us at any level, families, government, and so forth. So we really should be grateful. My first response probably would just be short in relating to the issue of GPV, as Premier has indicated, but emphasize that towards the end of last year, the Premier called what we called a special provincial executive council. And in that meeting, he instructed every single MEC to ensure that
every department that they are leading has a response or some response in relation to GBV, purely on the basis of what he has just said, that this is a matter that actually cuts across all departments, it cuts across everyone, and it is indeed a societal issue. So last year, all of us came up with programs, and we had started implementing, because in implementing also, you can't implement in silos or in isolation with each other. There are programs that certain departments needed to partner and work together towards implementation. I'll give you an example. The Department of Health, the Department of Social Development and Community Safety, there are programs that were conceptualized together and started being implemented together, and other departments did the same thing. Of course, COVID-19 then happened in March, so the majority of the programs that we had then stalled because of the focus of government. However, GBV did not stall, it continued, and it probably became more elevated because of the fact that most of us are sitting together. So Premier has then called us back to say we now really are forced to actually implement those programs that we had established, because even when COVID-19 started, we had plans that we can't now be operating as if we are starting all over again. We had to implement those plans that we had, and the majority of them were quite progressive because they were able to bring everyone in the society together and be able to work together. So we are really continuing with that, and we appreciate the guidance that will be given by the Premier. I think one of the other issues I personally want to appreciate is the fact that we now have what we call specialized courts established in some areas within the province, and of course that is through the leadership of the Premier. As you would know, courts are a forte of the national government, but for us to be able to have specialized courts, the Premier needed to engage with the national department to ensure that we have those. And the intention of the specialized courts is to ensure that where there is a case, whether of a femicide or GBV, it does not go on the roll and wait as long as all the other cases that are on the roll. As some of us might know, our rolls are often quite long, and it often takes about 2 to 3 years for a case to actually get to court. But a femicide case or a gender-based violence case, by the time it gets to court after 2 to 3 years, the witnesses have forgotten, the children have grew up, and so forth. So it just defeats the end of justice. So that engagement that the Premier had with National really assisted, because we then saw a few such specialized courts being implemented in the province. We are not happy with them, they are not enough, but at least we have started, and we are hoping that as we move forward we are going to continue to actually implement those, because that will then begin to deter even those that are thinking that they can do these things and get away with them. So as this particular province, we are taking the matter very seriously, and in our different programs we are ensuring that an element of gender-based violence, femicide is implemented, and we are able to speak to our people in a manner that, or in understanding how these things should be done. Premier speaks about, in particular, the majority of us would often focus on women and children, because, correctly so, those are the people that are at the most receiving end of gender-based violence. But when you do that as government, we are also ignoring the potential perpetrators of the future if you don't actually speak to the men as well. So we have decided as government to ensure that let's balance both these programs, so that while we deal with gender-based violence today, we also dissuade the potential perpetrators of gender-based violence. So our program is holistic in that particular fashion. In relation to the staff that have been removed from Wentworth Hospital, let me just indicate that firstly, the head of department, as the head of administration, is dealing with the matter, and we are following up. But let me firstly explain how our health workers are accommodated within our facilities. It's not all the hospitals in the province that will have accommodation or will be able to accommodate staff. It depends on where it is, it depends on the history of that particular facility and so forth. An example, we are building, or we've just built Pixliga Isaga Seme as a hospital, Pixliga Isaga Seme Memorial Hospital, but we've not built any accommodation areas there because we needed to focus on the clinical element of it. However, where facilities have such accommodation, right at the beginning, when a health worker is given or is allocated an accommodation, is on a basis of a lease or a lease agreement, where you are paying a particular amount, and an amount that would not be at market value, obviously, because you are within the system. But there is also a time frame, like any of us, that you get into a lease agreement, you pay 900 rands, and you'll be on that lease agreement for the next 3 years or for the next 2 years. Should you get a job elsewhere, you then relinquish your rights in that facility, and then you move on to the next facility. That has been the agreements, and that has been the contracts that have been signed throughout, not just in Wentworth. But in the middle of last year, even before I came, the management of the department realized that in essence, in other facilities, you find that there are health workers that have lived in these facilities, some of them for more than 5 years, some for more than 20 years, some retire while living in those facilities. Now that tells you that it's an issue of management. It means at some point there were people who were actually not following up on the contracts, not following up on whether the people who are living on those facilities should actually still be living on facilities, and if they are, how old is the contract, has it been renewed, and so forth. So last year the department took a decision that they are going to conduct an assessment of all the facilities, not just Wentworth, of all the facilities, who is in the facility, who lives in our nurses' home or a doctor's quarters, as others are called. Are they supposed to live there? Are they on a proper contract? Are they paying what they are supposed to be paying? And we are not charging, and we've not said that they should be charged at market value, because, I mean, they should get the benefit of being health workers, but they actually should live there. They should work in that particular facility. I'll give you an example. When you look at Inkosi Albert Luthuli Hospital, for instance, there are people who live in the quarters there who shouldn't be. They shouldn't be because some of them don't work in the facility anymore, but some of them do not qualify in terms of the criteria or criterion that is there. We've also received complaints from some of the unions to say some of the people that have been allocated in some of our facilities are allocated purely on the basis of whether they know the managers or not. Now, this assessment is actually meant to deal with that, not just at Wentworth, throughout. So it's not correct that when there are health workers who have been moved, they are moved because we are opening space for Cuban doctors. That is not true. It's an assessment we are conducting throughout, and we are going to continue to conduct throughout, because with COVID-19 and the expenses that we have as government now spent on COVID-19, we cannot afford to lose a single cent. We have to be prudent with the amount and with the money that we have. And so we have to make sure that the people that are allocated in our facilities are the right people that should be there, and have they signed the contract, are they paying what they should be paying, and are they there for the duration that has been agreed upon. So the only investigation that we are currently conducting in Wentworth is whether they were moved during the time of lockdown where people were not supposed to be moved, or it was after the regulation have been relaxed. So that is the investigation that we need to deal with, and then be able to correct that if that is the issue. But where there are people that are in our facilities and should not be, we are going to move them. And that is a point that we need, because an example is that there are young people who get into the system as young nurses, as young doctors, who actually should be provided with this accommodation, but are unable to do so because there is someone who has lived in that particular facility for 10 years, 20 years, just because they don't want to pay a market-related rental elsewhere. So we do need to start implementing our policies as they should be implemented, and we should be able to implement them to the T. We're not throwing out anyone and getting people to be destitute, but the majority of the people who should be in our facilities are people who should actually qualify to be there. We are doing that with all the facilities. We started before the COVID-19. COVID-19 happened. I think some of the facilities stalled. With the new management in some of our facilities, they then started re-looking at how their facilities are being managed, then hence the issue of Wentworth. So I wanted to emphasize that no one is being moved because of the Cuban doctors, but it's because it's an assessment we are conducting everywhere. In relation to what is going to happen to the Cuban doctors now that COVID-19 is on the decline, let me firstly explain that yes, our numbers have gone down tremendously and we're extremely excited about that. But what has happened in the rest of the world has also indicated to us that we need to be cautious. We need to be careful when we wind down on all the systems that are relating to COVID-19. So while we will be sort of winding down on a lot of things, we are not going to be cancelling everything at a go right at the beginning. An example is that I have been explaining that between the isolation facilities that we have are within our own facilities. But the quarantine facilities that we have, we had gone out to get your B&Bs, your hotels and so forth to utilize as quarantine. Now that our numbers have gone down, we are closing down all of those quarantine centers. Closing down in a sense that we are getting out of the contracts that we had with the different facilities, different lodges, different hotels. I must, however, also indicate that it's not the easiest thing to do, because we've got a legal document that is binding. We thought that we would need them for the next 6 months or so, and within 4 months COVID, we found ourselves that our numbers are going down. Now we have to negotiate with some of them to say, look, our numbers have gone down, we no longer need your facility, how can we get out of it? So we are in discussions. Some of them are quite practical and can understand where we are. Some of them are very difficult at all. In fact, some of them are insisting that we pay the full amount, even though we have not utilized their facility, or we are not going to utilize their facilities moving forward. So that is some of the challenges that we are faced with. So we are closing down all of those that are outside and then utilizing our own facilities within our own hospitals. I'm explaining this because I want to then come to the fact that the Cuban brigade that came is actually a Cuban brigade of clinicians, people who are doctors, who are specialists on different elements within the health spectrum. So we are going to continue to utilize them in our own hospitals. Both hospitals that we have converted, some of them into isolation centers, including the facilities that we currently have that are temporary or we call alternative buildings within our own facilities. So we still have work that can be done and should be done by these Cuban doctors. When we received the brigade of 27 Cuban doctors, a couple or a few of them were epidemiologists. Now, as a province, we were running out of those. We don't have enough. We don't have enough as the province of KwaZulu-Natal in terms of government, but we also don't have so many within the private sector. And sometimes those that are in the private sector, we are unable to afford them because at government, there's only a particular scale of payment that can be conducted. So when the brigade came, it also brought some of the specialists that we did not have and could not recruit due to the financial constraints. So we are quite happy to have them because we will be able to utilize them in those areas. I must also indicate that the majority of these Cuban doctors, especially the specialists that are within them, we have actually sent them to our rural hospitals where it has taken us quite a long time to actually recruit specialists in those areas, because sometimes our people are not very happy to go to rural areas in the north, because rural areas as they are. What you have in the rural areas is not necessarily what you would have in a Tegwini or Mkungundlovu, so it becomes a bit of a difficult time. So we've sent them there. They are quite happy. We are happy with their work. For as long as their contract continues, they will be there. But the good thing about that as well is that should a second wave come, we'll then still have them within the system and we'll be able to utilize them where we need them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, MEC. If there is a second round of hands, I will allow that. Premier, there are also other media houses that are watching us through our social mediums. We have some questions from them, but I'll check here whether do we still have a question. We are welcome. Oh, okay, you will be the first one. Then second one. Then we will take the one on the streams. If you can kindly press the mic so that we can hear.
Good afternoon, it's Lise Cummins from the Mercury. A question for Health MEC. What are the criteria for staff staying in the state's accommodation facilities?
Thank you. Over to you.
I have a question for MEC. There have been some reports of people saying that they had loved ones who passed on, and private mortuaries then picked up the bodies. When they then tried to get those bodies to their preferred mortuaries, they're then told that according to regulations from the departments, those COVID-19 bodies cannot be transported. Then it results in a situation where they are told that they need to pay 12,000, for an example, for the body to get released because the department does not allow that. So there have been some people who have been in those situations. Could you please give clarity as to what transpires in that situations, and what should the public do if they're in a situation where they are facing unscrupulous funeral practitioners who are trying to extort money?
Okay, thank you very much. We'll take this one question from Nkos Kona Duma from Eyewitness News. Mnumzana, here with my two questions. What key findings emerged out of the Premier's visit to Normandian in Newcastle yesterday, and what's the way forward? The second question, given that about 6% of recorded COVID-19 cases in the province are still active, what are the odds that these cases cannot be monitored and prevent community transmission so that the number of active cases is reduced to 0? Those are the two questions, Premier.
Thank you. In terms of the criteria, I think that one is a bit easy, but we could give you a long list. But firstly, you need to be able to be employed in the facility where you are looking for accommodation. You need to be a health worker. Other facilities will only have accommodation for nurses. Others will have what used to be called nurses' homes, and would have doctors' quarters. So it will depend on the nature of the facility that is there and the nature of accommodation that they have. But you need to also be able to prove that you need accommodation in a sense that you don't live close to your hospital and so forth. It would be difficult for you to get land, or it would be expensive for you to get accommodation and so forth. However, these accommodations or these rooms that we have in all our facilities are always limited because we never have enough that can accommodate everyone. So it should always on a first come first basis. That is why when circumstances of individual changes, we always encourage them to then move out into the world so that we are able to open up space for other young people or other needy health workers to be able to come into our facilities. So that has been the criteria, and I know there are other areas that I've left out, but I'm just summarizing that in a short space of time. Private mortuaries, those that have been requested to pay, really, you are correct, it is an unscrupulous practice. And what we are encouraging is that should there be anyone who's requested to pay, they immediately must get in touch with the Department of Health so that we are able to intervene. Having said that, the regulations are quite strict about how the remains of a person are handled. That is why when a loved one passes on in the hospital, it's not hospital workers that actually transport or move the body into whichever area that they are going to be to be held. Every time your loved one has passed on, as a family, you are called in, one or two of you, and you must then be able to explain, this is the mortuary that we are going to utilize, or this is the funeral parlor we are going to utilize. Then the hospital gets in touch with that funeral parlor, arranges times and so forth. The regulations say a mortal remains should not be in a hospital for more than 3 hours. So the mortal remains should have been picked up by the parlor within the 3 hours, and then they are arranged to move out. The only thing that the funeral parlors and the families should be able to do, if the family is no longer happy with the services of that funeral parlor, is to get authority from the Department of Health or through the facility. But there's no payment that should be making hands, because I mean, there's not much work that has been done, unless they are making the family pay for the one night that the body had been kept, or so and so forth. So I am agreeing with you, and the issue that we are raising is that should there be any such matters, please do not hesitate. Get in touch with us as the Department of Health. We will be able to intervene where it is within our authority to do so. We do have a matter right now that we are managing, where a similar situation actually happened, and the HOD, as the head of department, is investigating on what has happened on the matter, and we will find out in the next couple of days what has happened and how we are dealing with the matter. But I want to emphasize that should there be such an issue, anyone is welcome to get in touch with us. Our contact details are on Facebook, are on Twitter, are on Google. Myself, the HOD district directors, you can call or email any of us, and we are able to intervene immediately. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks. With regard to the question about our visit yesterday to Newcastle, we found that the challenge in terms of farm areas is around is caused by few issues. Firstly, the relationship between employers who are farmers and farm workers and farm dwellers, where farm dwellers are not allowed to get services. Whether you talk about water, sanitation, toilets, or you talk about electricity, that makes the life of those people very challenging and difficult. The second is that the farm dwellers feel that they are not given support by the police. When they are harassed, their cases are not getting prioritized by the police. Then also the issue of labor conditions was raised, and we've developed a plan to deal with all of those issues, including getting the Department of Labor as part of our team to work there, but including engaging with organizations of farmers to look on how to provide basic services to the people in the area. Lastly, to monitor the functioning of the police and the policing in the whole area. Thank you.
We then allow the Premier to brief us in isiZulu.
Uma singa summarize nje, siyafisa uqala ngokubonga kakhulu kunina nonke ukuthi nibe ingxenye yale briefing. Njengoba sazi uPresident ubaba uCyril Ramaphosa unikeze inkulumo wa-announcer wathula ukuthi kusukela namuhla ebusuku izwe lizodlulela ku-alert level 1. Lokhu kusho ukuthi i-infection rate okusho ukuthi ukutheleleka ama-cases asephansi, kodwa futhi kusho ukuthi iminyango nomnyango wethu wezempilo uyaqhubeka ukuthi ubeke amandla kumbe capacity yokwazi ukuthi udile nama-cases. Kodwa siyafisa ukunika umseluleko esithi ukuthi siya ku-alert level 1 akusho khona ukuthi igciwane le-COVID-19 alisekho. Siyafuna ukubonga ukuthi lokhu ukudlulela ku-level 1 kuzosho ukuthi abasebenzi bakahulumeni kumele babuyele bonke emsebenzini. Lokho kubaluleke kakhulu, futhi siyacela kubasebenzi ukuthi sibhukule sizithathe sibuyele ngomfutho omkhulu. Kube sengathi sivela mhlambe empini yomhlaba, sidinga ukubhukula sithathe izwe silise phambili. Siyazi futhi ukuthi COVID-19 ishayeka kakhulu yawukhahlameza umnotho. Yingakho sithi kubantu base-South Africa bonke naba KwaZulu-Natal isikakhulukazi masakhe umnotho omusha ozokwazi ukuqinisekisa ukuthi bonke abantu bayahlomula. Lo mnotho akube wokhanda amathuba emisebenzi, umnotho okhulisa osomabhizinisi abancane. Sithi lokho kuyokwenzeka kuphela uma thina abantu balesi sifundazwe sithenga izinto ezikhiqizwe la kwi-province nase-South Africa. Siyafuna futhi ukunxusintsha ukuthi iqala ibheke ukuthi ingathembeli kuphela ekutheni izoqashwa, kodwa nayo ayingene manje emkhakheni womnotho ikwazi ukubheka ukuthi ingabamba liphi iqhaza. Mangisicizeleleke ukuthi njengesifundazwe saKwaZulu-Natal esikhathini esingeside sizothula uhlelo oluphelele oluzobe lusho ukuthi umnotho siwuvuselela kanjani. Siyafuna ukubonga ukuthi since kuvuliwe ezokuvakasha kubonakala i-tourism ibuyela esimeni, ngoba imbiko isitshena ukuthi eThekwini i-occupancy rate okusho ukuthi i-rate yabantu abahlala emahhotela nasey'ndaweni zokuhlala eziqashisayo zokuvakasha iya ngokuya iba normal ibuyela esimeni. eThekwini nje 65%, kwiLembe 60%, kuGu 30%, kanti eMgungundlovu irange between 75 and 95, kwiZululand 30, amajuba u50, kanti kwikhungoze zemvelo wildlife u30%. Siyazi futhi ukuthi kunamabhizinisi anjengamanje angaphansi kwe-rescue business rescue njenge-Fairmont Zimbali. Singuhulumeni siyakhulumisana nabaphathi bakhona ukuqinisekisa ukuthi lesikhondla sezokuvakasha esilapha kwaDukuza asivali, kodwa siyakwazi ukubuye sibuyele esimeni sisimama. Uma ke sikanikezela izinamba zizonke ziyaveza ukuthi i-infection rate yehlile. Ama cases nje amasha kuyizolo abe u209, kanti i-total yama cases esewonke ingu-117,565. Siyazi ukuthi bakhona bezempilo, abahlengikazi nabasebenzi odokotela abathelelekile. KwaZulu-Natal nje abasebenzi kwezempilo abathelelekile bangu-7,360, kanti ngeshwa nokubuhlungu ukuthi abangu-68 baye badlula emhlabeni. Sizwekalisa ukuthi sizwelane nemindeni yabo, ngokunjalo sithi imphefumulo yabo mayiphumule kahle. Siyazi ukuthi khona iminyango ephenyayo ngendlela okuphathwe ngayo izimali ngalesi sikhathi se-COVID-19. Sinika isiqinisekiso esithi yonke leyo minyango iyaqhubeka, futhi ama-disciplinary actions ayaqhubeka ngokufanelekile, ngokunjalo amacala bekudinga avulwe avuliwe. Abaphenyi bamaphoyisa bayalandelela kulokho. Ngiyafisa ukuvala ngokukhumbuza nokugcizelela ukuthi i-COVID-19 isekhona. Ukuya ku-level 1 kukodwa nje kusho ukuthi sise kwi-lockdown, akusho ukuthi i-lockdown ayikho. Siyabona abanye sebecabanga ukuthi sekuvuliwe sengenziwa noma kanjani. Cha, masiqhubeke sifake ama-mask, siqhubeke siwashe izandla ngamanzi nensipho, sisanitize, silandele imigomo yo-social distance nanoma yinini uma singaphandle sikubantu. Siyabonga.
Premier, we can adjourn this meeting. Thank you.